A foolish husband divorced his pregnant wife because of his mistress's lies, but he regretted it after she vanished. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories, my dearest and most cherished story readers. A very happy new year to each one of you. As we step into this beautiful new chapter, I want to thank you for being a part of our journey, for your love, your time, and your unwavering support. Are our stories touching your heart? Do they bring a smile to your face or maybe even a tear to your eye? Please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Your words mean the world to me, and they inspire us to keep weaving these tales just for you. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and become a part of our ever-growing family. Together, let's fill this year with more love, joy, and unforgettable stories. Now, without further ado, let's dive into today's story. Get comfortable, open your heart, and let the magic unfold. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the mahogany floors of the black residence, a Victorian brownstone that stood proudly among Manhattan's most coveted addresses. Balfour Blue Black stood at the bay window of his bedroom, watching the first leaves of autumn dance across their meticulously maintained garden. At 42, he had achieved what most would consider the American dream, yet it wasn't the material success that made his heart swell with pride. It was the sound of his wife's gentle breathing behind him, still lost in peaceful slumber. Nia Adama Black was everything he had ever dreamed of, and more. Her reputation as one of New York Presbyterian's finest pediatric surgeons was legendary, but it was her soul that had captured him 7 years ago. That fateful night at the hospital charity gala, she had stood out not for her stunning appearance in midnight blue, but for the way she spoke passionately about revolutionizing pediatric care in underserved communities. While others networked for prestige, she had sketched surgical innovations on a cocktail napkin, her eyes alight with possibility. Their courtship had been like something out of a dream. Balfour remembered their first real date, not at some fancy restaurant, but at a small construction site where he was developing affordable housing. She had worn boots with her designer dress, asking intelligent questions about load-bearing walls and sustainable materials. By the end of the evening, they had sat on exposed beams, sharing cold pizza and drawing up plans to include a children's clinic in the building's design. That was the moment he knew she was the one. The sound of stirring sheets pulled him from his reverie. Nia sat up, her dreadlocks, now streaked with the faintest hints of silver, cascading over her shoulders. "Good morning, architect of my dreams," she murmured, her voice still husky with sleep. The morning light caught the deep umber of her skin, making her glow like burnished gold. Even after 7 years of marriage, the sight of her took his breath away. "Good morning, healer of tiny hearts," he replied, crossing the room to sit beside her. It was their ritual, these quiet moments before the world demanded their attention. His firm, Black & Associates, had grown from a small startup to one of Manhattan's most sought-after architectural practices, featured in every major design magazine. Just last month, Architectural Digest had done a spread on their home, praising the seamless blend of Victorian charm and modern innovation. But none of that compared to the simple joy of these morning moments with Nia. She reached for her tablet, already checking patient updates. Her dedication never ceased to amaze him. Last week, she had performed a groundbreaking surgery on conjoined twins, a procedure that had made headlines across the medical community. Yet here she was, checking on every patient with the same care she would give her own child. The thought made his heart skip a beat. They had been trying for a baby for the past 2 years, riding the emotional roller coaster of fertility treatments and disappointments. Nia had handled it with characteristic grace, but he had seen the toll it took on her. The quiet tears when she thought he was asleep, the way she lingered in the nursery they had optimistically designed together. "Bal," she said suddenly, her tablet forgotten in her lap. There was something different in her voice that made him turn sharply. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears, but her smile, oh, her smile could have lit up all of Manhattan during a blackout. "I have something to tell you." His heart stopped, then started again at double speed. He knew that look, had dreamed of that look. "Naya?" he whispered, hardly daring to hope. She reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a small white stick. His hands trembled as he took it, vision blurring as he saw the two clear lines. "We're having a baby," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to be sure before I told you. I had Dr. Chen run the blood work yesterday. We're really having a baby, Bal." The tears came freely then, 7 years of love and 2 years of longing crystallizing into this perfect moment. He gathered her in his arms, feeling the strength in her lithe frame, the miracle of their child growing beneath her heart. They stayed that way for a long time, whispering dreams and plans, his hands protective over her still flat stomach. Later that morning, as Nia prepared for her shift at the hospital, Balfour sat in his home office, staring at the family photo wall they had created. Space had been deliberately left for the children they hoped to have. Now, finally, they would fill that space. He opened his laptop, already planning modifications to the nursery design. Everything had to be perfect for their miracle. His phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. New client meeting at 10 a.m. He smiled, thinking how he would share the good news with his team afterward. They were family too, in their own way. The reminder showed the client's name, Lara Jackson, Luxury Beachfront Property Development. It was just another meeting, another client, another day in his perfect life. He had no way of knowing that when Lara Jackson walked through his office door, she would bring with her the seeds of destruction for everything he held dear. No way of knowing that his perfect life was balanced on a knife's edge, about to fall into an abyss of his own making. Looking back, he would remember this morning as the last moment of pure, unalloyed happiness. The last moment before doubt and desire began their insidious dance through his life. The last moment before he started down a path that would cost him everything he held dear. But for now, he was simply Balfour Blue-Black, successful architect, devoted husband, and father-to-be, standing at the peak of his perfect life. For now, the morning sun still painted everything in shades of gold, and the future stretched out before him like an architect's dream, full of possibility and promise. For now, love was still enough, and truth was still simple, and happiness was still a thing he could hold in his hands without fear of it slipping away. His phone buzzed again. 10 minutes until the meeting with Lara Jackson. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection, and headed for the office, carrying Nia's joy like a talisman in his heart. The perfect life they had built together was about to face its greatest test, and he was utterly unprepared for the storm that was coming. Chapter 2. The Temptress. The Black & Associates conference room had never felt smaller than it did the moment Lara Jackson walked through its glass doors. She moved like liquid silver, each step deliberate and graceful in Christian Louboutin heels that clicked against the marble floors with hypnotic precision. Balfour found himself standing straighter, adjusting his tie, an unconscious gesture that would later haunt his memories. "Mr. Black," she purred, extending a manicured hand. Her emerald eyes caught the morning light, flashing like cut gems. "Or may I call you Balfour? Your reputation precedes you." Her voice carried hints of southern honey, warm and sweet, with an undertone that reminded him of aged bourbon. He gestured toward the presentation materials he'd prepared, trying to maintain professional distance. "Please, have a seat, Miss Jackson. I've reviewed your preliminary requirements for the Hamptons property." But as she settled into the chair beside him, not across the table as most clients would, a subtle scent of jasmine and something darker, more exotic, wrapped around him like invisible silk. Call me Lara, she smiled, leaning closer to examine the drawings. Her dark hair fell in a perfect curtain, brushing against his arm. Everyone does. She paused, studying the preliminary sketches with an intensity that both impressed and unsettled him. You know, these are exactly what I imagined. It's almost as if you've been reading my mind. The meeting stretched from its scheduled hour into 2, then 3. Lara's vision for her beach house was ambitious, a modernist dream of glass and steel that would rise from the dunes like a mirage. But it was her personal stories that kept Balfour engaged, each one seeming to echo his own experiences with uncanny precision. I always believed architecture could change lives, she mused, now perched on the edge of his desk as they reviewed material samples. That's why I started my foundation. We build schools in developing countries. It was exactly the kind of project Balfour had dreamed of pursuing, something that combined his skills with genuine social impact. He found himself sharing his own dreams, ideas he'd never even told Nia. I've always wanted to do more than just luxury projects, he admitted. Sometimes I feel trapped by success, you know? Like I've built this perfect life, but somewhere along the way I lost something essential. Lara's eyes softened with understanding. The cage is still a cage, even if it's made of gold, she murmured, her fingers brushing against his hand as she reached for a material sample. The touch sent an electric current through his body, followed immediately by a wave of guilt. His phone buzzed, a text from Nia. She was having a rough morning with morning sickness and had to cancel her afternoon surgeries. He should have felt concerned, should have wanted to rush home to her. Instead, he felt a flicker of irritation at the interruption. Everything all right? Lara asked, her voice laden with genuine-seeming concern. When he explained, her response was perfectly calibrated. Poor thing. And poor you. It must be hard watching someone you love suffer and feeling so helpless. She paused, then added softly, My sister went through the same thing. Her husband, well, let's just say not everyone handles the pressure well. Days turned into weeks, and Lara became a constant presence in his office. Each meeting ran long, each conversation delved deeper. She had a way of making him feel understood in ways he hadn't even known he needed. While Nia's pregnancy progressed, bringing with it a parade of doctor's appointments and midnight cravings, Lara represented an escape into a world of pure possibility. She never crossed any obvious lines, never made any overt moves. Instead, she built a web of small moments, a lingering touch here, a shared secret there. She mirrored his interest with surgical precision. Her art collection featured his favorite painters. Her taste in music aligned perfectly with his. Even her philosophical views seemed to complement his own. One evening, as autumn painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson, they found themselves working late on the beach house plans. Nia had texted to say she was staying overnight at the hospital, monitoring a critical patient. The office was empty, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. You know what I love about you, Balfour? Lara said, standing by the window. The city lights haloed her silhouette, making her look almost ethereal. You see the world the way I do. We're both dreamers who understand that sometimes, to build something extraordinary, you have to be willing to break what's merely good. She turned to face him, and in that moment, she was everything he thought he'd ever wanted. Freedom, passion, understanding, possibility. She represented every road not taken, every dream deferred, in the name of responsibility and propriety. I shouldn't tell you this, she whispered, moving closer, but I feel like I've known you all my life, like everything before was just preparation for meeting you. Her hand found his chest, resting over his heart. Tell me you don't feel it too. The rational part of his brain screamed warnings about Nia, about their baby, about professional ethics. But Lara had spent weeks laying the groundwork, carefully dismantling his defenses brick by brick. Each shared confidence, each seemingly coincidental common interest, each moment of perfect understanding had been a calculated step toward this moment. He stepped back, guilt and desire warring in his chest. "I'm married, Lara. We can't—" "I know," she interrupted, her voice thick with emotion that seemed genuine but wasn't. "God, I know, and I respect that. I respect her. But Balfour—" She let the sentence hang, heavy with unspoken possibilities. That night he drove home in a daze, his wedding ring feeling suddenly heavy on his finger. Nia was still at the hospital, their bedroom dark and empty. He stood in the nursery they'd planned together, running his hands over the half-finished mural of stars and moons. Everything in his life had seemed so certain this morning. Now, standing in the dark, he felt the first tremors of an earthquake that would soon destroy everything he held dear. His phone buzzed, another text from Lara. "Sweet dreams, architect of dreams, tomorrow's another day." Each word was carefully chosen, innocent enough to be explained away, yet laden with meaning that made his heart race. He didn't respond, but he didn't delete the message either. And in that small decision, the first brick of his perfect life began to crumble. The temptress had laid her foundation, and the real destruction was yet to come. In the darkness of his perfect home, Balfour Blue-Black stood at a crossroads, unaware that every step toward Lara was a step toward an abyss from which there would be no return. Chapter 3. The Web of Lies. The December rain pelted against the office windows like tiny bullets, matching the staccato rhythm of Balfour's heartbeat as he stared at the manila envelope on his desk. Lara sat perched on the edge of his leather sofa, her usual confidence replaced by what appeared to be genuine concern. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second echoing in the empty office like a funeral bell. "I've been struggling with whether to tell you this," Lara began, her voice trembling with carefully manufactured emotion. She hadn't planned to stay late, at least that's what she claimed. But here she was, still in her designer suit from their client meeting, her emerald eyes shadowed with what looked like genuine distress. "I care about you too much to keep silent." Balfour's fingers traced the edge of the envelope, fear and curiosity warring in his chest. The past few weeks had been increasingly strained at home. Nia had been distant, working longer hours, taking calls that she stepped out of the room to answer. He'd told himself it was normal. She was a busy surgeon, after all, and pregnancy was changing their dynamics, but there had been moments, tiny fragments of doubt that he couldn't quite shake. "What is this about, Lara?" His voice sounded strange to his own ears, thick with apprehension. Outside, a flash of lightning illuminated the Manhattan skyline, casting dramatic shadows across the room. She stood, moving to the window, her silhouette outlined by the city lights below. "Last week, I was having lunch at the Peninsula. I wasn't going to say anything, but—" She turned to face him, and in the dim light, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "I saw Nia there. She wasn't alone." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Balfour's hand tightened on the envelope. "She had a medical conference last week. She told me—" "The conference was cancelled," Lara interrupted softly. "I checked. Open the envelope, Balfour. You deserve to know the truth." With trembling fingers, he pulled out a stack of glossy photographs. The first showed Nia entering the Peninsula, dressed in the blue dress he'd bought her for their anniversary. The second caught her embracing a man in the lobby, Dr. Marcus Chen, her colleague from the hospital. The third showed them entering an elevator together, his hand on the small of her back. "There's more," Lara whispered, now standing behind his chair. Her perfume, jasmine and something darker, enveloped him as she leaned over his shoulder. Keep looking. More photos followed. Nia and Marcus at a cafe he didn't recognize, their heads close together in intimate conversation. Nia leaving a brownstone in Brooklyn late one evening, Marcus watching from the doorway. Each image was like a dagger to Balfour's heart, each one perfectly staged to tell a story of betrayal. The dates, he muttered, noticing the timestamps. These go back months. Before the pregnancy. The implication hit him like a physical blow, making him lean back in his chair, gasping for air. Lara's hands found his shoulders, squeezing gently. I hired a private investigator, she admitted. After I saw them at the peninsula, I couldn't bear to see you being deceived like this. The PI tracked their meetings, at least twice a week, sometimes more. Always when you're working late. Memories began to resurface, taking on new and horrible meanings. Nia's late-night emergency surgeries, the mysterious text messages, the way she sometimes seemed distant during their intimate moments, the fertility struggles that had preceded this miracle pregnancy. Marcus Chen, Balfour said, the name bitter on his tongue. He's her supervisor on the pediatric ward. They've worked together for years. Even as he spoke, other memories surfaced. The way Marcus looked at Nia during hospital functions, their easy laughter at staff parties, the inside jokes he'd never quite understood. There's something else, Lara said, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope, smaller this time. The PI, he did some digging into Dr. Chen's background. He specializes in fertility treatments, Balfour. He's been helping couples conceive for over a decade. The implication knocked the air from his lungs. No, he whispered. No, she wouldn't. The timing fits, Lara pressed gently. Think about it. All those failed attempts and suddenly she's pregnant? Right when these meetings started becoming more frequent, she knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. I'm so sorry, Balfour. You deserve so much better than this. The room spun around him, years of trust and love crumbling like sandcastles in a storm. Every moment of happiness with Nia now felt tainted, corrupted by the poison of doubt. The nursery they'd planned together, the names they'd discussed late at night, the tiny shoes he'd bought on impulse last week, all of it seemed like props in a cruel theater of lies. What am I supposed to do? He asked, his voice breaking. How can I even look at her? Lara's hands tightened on his. You confront her. You demand the truth. And then... She paused, her eyes meeting his with perfect understanding. Then you decide if you can live with a lie, or if you deserve a chance at real happiness. Thunder rolled outside, nature providing a dramatic backdrop to the destruction of his world. On his desk, his phone lit up with a text from Nia. Missing you. Brought you dinner, but you weren't home. Everything okay? The concern in her message felt like acid on his skin. How many times had she texted him like this after being with Marcus? How many times had she come home, kissed him, made love to him, all while carrying the secret of her betrayal? I should have seen it, he muttered, more to himself than to Lara. All the signs were there. We never want to see the betrayal of those we love, Lara replied, her voice thick with emotion. It's why they can hurt us so deeply. She stood, gathering her things. I should go. You need time to process this. But Balfour... She paused at the door, silhouetted against the night sky. Remember that you're not alone. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. After she left, Balfour sat in his darkened office for hours, the photographs spread before him like tarot cards foretelling the death of his marriage. Each image told a story of betrayal. Each timestamp marked another moment when his perfect life had been nothing but an elaborate lie. He didn't know then that he was seeing only what Lara wanted him to see. Didn't know that the photographs had been carefully staged, the timestamps manipulated, the entire narrative crafted with surgical precision. Didn't know that even now, Lara was in her own office, reviewing the success of her plan with clinical satisfaction. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they would grow into thorny vines that would strangle every beautiful thing in his life. In the darkness of his office, surrounded by false evidence of betrayal, Balfour Blue-Black began to plot the confrontation that would destroy everything he held dear. And somewhere in the city, Lara Jackson smiled, knowing that her web of lies had caught its prey perfectly. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The kitchen of the black residence had always been Nia's sanctuary. Its marble countertops had witnessed countless intimate moments, midnight snacks shared after her long surgeries, Sunday morning pancake experiments, quiet conversations about their future family. Now, at 2 a.m. on a bitter December night, those same countertops reflected the harsh overhead lights like accusatory spotlights as Balfour spread the photographs across them one by one. Nia stood at the kitchen island, one hand protectively curved over her growing belly, the other gripping the counter so hard her knuckles showed white against her dark skin. She wore one of Balfour's old Harvard sweatshirts, her pregnancy making it fit snugly now. Her dreadlocks were tied back in a loose silk scarf, her face bare of makeup, vulnerable in the harsh light. She looked beautiful, Balfour thought bitterly. Beautiful and guilty. What are these supposed to be? Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her shock as she looked at the images. The Peninsula Hotel, the cafe, the Brooklyn brownstone, her life with Marcus Chen laid bare in glossy 8x10 prints. Don't! Balfour's voice cracked like a whip in the quiet kitchen. Don't insult us both by pretending you don't know exactly what these are. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through texts he'd gathered over the past week. Emergency surgery on the 15th. Funny, because according to these photos, you were having quite an intimate dinner with Marcus that night. Bal, please! Nia reached for him, but he jerked away as if her touch would burn him. The hurt that flashed across her face almost broke his resolve. Almost. 7 years, he continued, his voice rising. 7 years of marriage, Nia. Was any of it real, or was I just, what, convenient, successful, a good cover while you built your career? His laugh was hollow, echoing off the kitchen tiles. God, I was so blind. All those late nights at the hospital, all those conferences, all those emergency calls. Stop it! Nia's voice sharp with anger now. You're not thinking clearly. Marcus is my colleague, my mentor. These pictures, they're not what they look like. Someone is manipulating you. Manipulating me. Balfour slammed his hand down on the counter, making the water glasses rattle. Like you've been manipulating me. The fertility treatments, Nia. Did you think I wouldn't find out? All those months of trying, failing. Was that just an act too? Were you laughing at me behind my back while Marcus gave you what I couldn't? The color drained from Nia's face. How dare you? She whispered, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. How dare you reduce everything we've been through to this conspiracy you've created in your head? Those treatments were real. Every disappointment, every tear, every moment of hope, they were real. And the baby? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Is it even mine? The slap echoed through the kitchen before either of them realized Nia had moved. The sting on his cheek was nothing compared to the agony in her eyes. I have never, she said, each word precisely enunciated through tears, been unfaithful to you. Not once. Not ever. That child growing inside me is yours, Balfour Blue-Black, and the fact that you could even question that shows how far you've fallen. She moved to the photographs, picking them up one by one. The Peninsula? That was a medical ethics board meeting. Marcus was there because he's on the board. The cafe, we were discussing a complicated surgery for conjoined twins. The Brooklyn address. That's where we run a free clinic for underprivileged children every Wednesday night. Every single one of these moments has an explanation, but you didn't even ask. You didn't come to me with your doubts. You just condemned me. There are timestamps, Balfour insisted, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Dates, times. all of which could be verified if you'd bothered to check with the hospital, with my colleagues, with anyone other than whoever fed you these lies. Nia's voice broke. Who did this, Bal? Who poisoned your mind so completely that you could look at me who has loved you through everything, and see a traitor? The name Lara rose to his lips but died there. Saying it would make this real, would admit that he had let another woman turn him against his wife. Instead, he grabbed one of the photos, Nia and Marcus embracing in the hotel lobby. Explain this then. This doesn't look professional. That was the day I found out I was pregnant, Nia said quietly. Marcus had just confirmed the blood tests. I was so happy, so excited to tell you. I hugged him in gratitude. He's been our fertility specialist for 2 years, Balfour. He's been fighting for this baby alongside us the whole time. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Memories rushed back. Marcus at their fertility consultations, his steady optimism, his genuine joy when treatments showed promise. But then, other images intruded. Lara's concerned face, her carefully presented evidence, her gentle suggestions of betrayal. I don't. Balfour stumbled back, gripping the counter for support. If what you're saying is true. If? Nia's voice was ice now. If, after 7 years, after everything we've built together, you need proof of my faithfulness, while you've been working late with your new client, I've been creating life. While you've been pulling away from me, I've been fighting morning sickness and mood swings and the terror of another miscarriage. And now you stand in our kitchen, in the home we built together, and accuse me of the one thing I could never do. She moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. Who are you, Balfour? Because the man I married would never do this. The man I married would have trusted me enough to ask questions before making accusations. The man I married. Her voice broke. The man I married loved me. I do love you, he whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to his ears. No, Nia said softly, turning to face him. Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't take carefully crafted lies over years of truth. Love doesn't assassinate trust without a trial. She touched her belly gently. This baby deserves better than a father who could believe such things about its mother. What are you saying? Fear crept into Balfour's voice. I'm saying that I don't recognize you anymore, and I won't raise our child in a home where trust is so fragile it can be shattered by a few photographs and whispered allegations. She moved toward the door, then paused. When you remember who you are, who we were, you know where to find me. But until then, I can't be here watching you destroy everything we built on the say-so of someone who clearly wants to tear us apart. Nia, wait. But she was already moving up the stairs, her footsteps echoing through their suddenly too empty home. Balfour stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of his accusations. The photographs seemed to mock him now, their evidence suddenly flimsy in the face of Nia's raw truth. But Lara's poison had done its work too well. Even as doubt crept in, suspicion lingered like a cancer in his heart. Upstairs, he could hear Nia moving around their bedroom, drawers opening, closet doors sliding, the sounds of a life being packed away. He should go up there, he thought, should stop her, should apologize, should fight for their marriage. Instead, he stood frozen, paralyzed by pride and confusion and the lingering effects of Lara's careful manipulation. When Nia came down 30 minutes later with a small suitcase, her eyes were dry, but her face was set in lines of grief that aged her a decade. I'll be at my sister's, she said quietly. When you're ready to trust me again, really trust me, not just say the words, you can find me there. But Balfour. She paused at the door, one hand still on her belly. Don't wait. Too long. Some things, once broken, can never be repaired. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. Balfour stood in their perfect kitchen, surrounded by false evidence and real consequences, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in colors that looked like bruises. He had just driven away the one person who had never betrayed him, and he had no idea how to fix what he had broken. His phone buzzed. A text from Lara. "Thinking of you. Here if you need me." The words glowed on his screen like embers, ready to burn what remained of his marriage to ashes. And in the growing light of morning, Balfour Blue-Black began to understand that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, but he was still too blind to see the puppet strings that had guided his every move. Chapter 5. The Irreversible Decision. The divorce papers lay on the marble kitchen counter like a bomb waiting to detonate. They had arrived by courier that morning, crisp and pristine in their manila envelope, each page tagged with yellow signs indicating where signatures were needed. Balfour stared at them through a haze of scotch, his third of the morning, though the grandfather clock in the hall hadn't yet struck noon. 2 weeks had passed since Nia walked out. 2 weeks of silence, broken only by terse messages through their lawyers. She hadn't returned his calls, hadn't responded to his texts. Her sister, when he'd tried to visit, had closed the door in his face with a look of such contempt it had physically staggered him. "It's for the best," Lara's voice drifted from the living room, where she'd made herself at home over the past week. She claimed she was there to support him, to help him through this difficult time. She moved through his house like a ghost, rearranging things subtly. A photo turned face down here, a memento moved to a drawer there, each small change erasing another trace of Nia's presence. Balfour picked up the divorce petition, his eyes blurring over the legal language. Nia was asking for nothing. No alimony, no share in his firm, not even the house they'd lovingly restored together. All she wanted was sole custody of their unborn child, with his parental rights contingent on a DNA test after birth. The words felt like acid in his throat. Petitioner seeks sole custody due to respondents' demonstrated inability to maintain basic trust and mutual respect essential to co-parenting, as evidenced by false accusations of infidelity and emotional abuse during pregnancy. "She's trying to manipulate you," Lara said softly, appearing at his shoulder like a shadow. Her hand found his, warm against his cold fingers. "Using the baby as leverage." Classic move. Her perfume, jasmine and darkness, wrapped around him like a shroud. "Maybe she's right," he muttered, pushing away from the counter. The room spun slightly, scotch and lack of sleep making his movements unsteady. "Maybe I should have trusted..." "Trusted what?" Lara's voice sharpened. "Your eyes? The evidence? Your own instincts that told you something was wrong?" She moved to the window, sunlight creating a halo around her silhouette. "You saw the photos, Balfour. The timestamps, the pattern of deception." But doubt had begun to creep in, growing stronger with each passing day. Memories haunted him. Nia's face when he accused her, the absolute truth in her eyes when she denied the allegations, the way her hand had protectively cradled their unborn child. Their child, not Marcus's, never Marcus's. His phone buzzed. Another message from his lawyer. "Dr. Chen has provided hospital records confirming his role as your fertility specialist. All meetings documented were medical in nature. Suggest reviewing strategy." "More manipulation," Lara cut in before he could finish reading. "They're closing ranks, protecting one of their own. You know how the medical community works." She moved closer, her hand finding the nape of his neck, fingers working at the tension there. "Don't let them gaslight you, darling. You know what you saw." But did he? The photographs that had seemed so damning now felt orchestrated. The timestamps that had proved betrayal now seemed suspiciously perfect. Even Marcus Chen's reputation, which Lara had painted as questionable, was being defended by every colleague he'd contacted. "I need to think," he muttered, pulling away from Lara's touch. "I need to clear my head." "What you need," Lara said firmly, "is to sign these papers and begin healing. Every day you delay is another day she wins, another day she gets to play the victim." She picked up a pen, his favorite Mont Blanc, a wedding gift from Nia, and held it out. "End this, Balfour. End it now." He took the pen, its weight familiar yet strange in his hand. The clock struck noon, each chime like a funeral bell. Somewhere in the city, Nia was probably at the hospital, saving children's lives, their own child growing beneath her heart. A heart he had accused of betrayal based on, what? Photos that could be explained, meetings that had legitimate medical purposes? "Wait," he said, the pen hovering over the signature line. "I should talk to her first. One more time. Face to face." Lara's expression flickered, frustration quickly masked by concern. "And let her manipulate you again?" "She's had 2 weeks to coordinate stories with Marcus, to fabricate evidence, She's my wife." The words exploded from him, echoing off the kitchen tiles. "The mother of my child. I owe her at least—" "You owe her nothing," Lara hissed, mask slipping for just a moment. "She betrayed you, humiliated you, made you question your own worth as a man. And now you want to crawl back to her?" Something in her tone made him look up sharply. For just a moment he caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or triumph barely concealed. But then she softened, reaching for him. "I'm sorry, I care about you too much to watch you let her hurt you again." The pen felt heavier with each passing second. Outside, a winter storm was gathering, dark clouds rolling in from the harbour. The kitchen grew darker, shadows lengthening across the marble counter where their life together would end with a single signature. "Sign it," Lara whispered, pressed against him now, her breath warm on his neck. "Sign it and be free. Free to start over, free to find real love, free to be with someone who truly understands you." The implication hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and possibility. And in that moment, looking into Lara's emerald eyes, Balfour made the decision that would haunt him for years to come. With 3 strokes of the pen, he signed away his marriage, his family, his future. The moment the pen left the paper, Lara's arms wrapped around him. "You did the right thing," she murmured. "Now we can begin." But even as she kissed him, even as he tried to lose himself in her embrace, a voice in the back of his mind screamed that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The storm broke outside, rain lashing against the windows like tears, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for what he had destroyed. Later that evening, after Lara had gone home, Balfour stood in the nursery they had planned together. The half-finished mural of stars and moons seemed to mock him now. He ran his fingers over the tiny clothes Nia had already bought, each one chosen with such love and hope. His phone buzzed one final time, a text from Nia's sister. "She's gone, left the city. Don't try to find her. You've done enough damage." The message was followed by a photo. Nia's wedding ring left on their bedside table, catching the light one last time before being consigned to memory. As night fell over Manhattan, Balfour Blue Black sat alone in a nursery that would never welcome his child, surrounded by the wreckage of his perfect life. And somewhere in the city, Lara Jackson raised a glass to her success, her web of lies having accomplished exactly what she had planned all along. The divorce papers would be filed in the morning, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to years of regret and searching. But for now, in the darkness of his empty home, Balfour could only stare at his reflection in the window, wondering when exactly he had become the kind of man who would throw away everything he loved for a lie told with emerald eyes and a voice like honey. Chapter 6. The First Cracks. Spring came to Manhattan like a fever dream, cherry blossoms carpeting Central Park in pink snow, while Balfour watched from his office window, a glass of bourbon untouched on his desk. 3 months had passed since he signed the divorce papers. 3 months since Nia vanished from his life, taking their unborn child with her. 3 months of trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. Lara had moved into the brownstone 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, bringing with her an army of decorators who stripped away every trace of Nia's presence. The warm, earthen tones that had made their house a home were replaced by cool greys and sterile whites. Modern art replaced family photos. Even the kitchen, Nia's beloved sanctuary, had been gutted and rebuilt to Lara's specifications. "It's about new beginnings," she'd said, watching contractors tear out the vintage tiles Nia had lovingly selected. "We can't build our future in the shadow of your past." But lately, something about her voice had begun to sound different. The honey-sweet tone that had once seemed so sincere now carried undertones he couldn't quite identify. It started with small things, a dinner with her foundation's board members that had supposedly raised millions for schools in developing countries. Except when he'd mentioned it to his firm's charitable giving department, they couldn't find any record of the foundation's existence. "Oh, we're very private," Lara had explained, her laugh tinkling like breaking glass. "We operate through a network of shell companies to maximize tax efficiency." The explanation made sense, but something in her eyes, a flicker of calculation perhaps, had planted the first seed of doubt. Then came the beach house project, the reason they'd met in the first place. The plans had been approved, contracts signed, but every time construction was about to begin, Lara would demand changes, each revision more extensive and expensive than the last. "I just want it to be perfect," she'd purr, running her fingers through his hair as she reviewed the latest changes. "Like us." But the revisions always required more money, more transfers, to accounts he never quite got full documentation for. The first real crack appeared during a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Lara had been holding court among Manhattan's elite, charming them with stories of her international philanthropy work. Balfour had stood proudly at her side until he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "Lara Jackson," an elderly socialite had whispered to her companion. "That's not her name. I knew her as Lauren Jenkins in Palm Beach. She was engaged to my nephew until his accounts were mysteriously drained." When confronted, Lara had an explanation ready. "A jealous ex-fiancé spread horrible rumors about me. I had to change my name to escape the harassment. I should have told you, but I was afraid." Her tears had seemed genuine, her distress real. He'd held her, comforted her, pushed aside his doubts. But the cracks kept appearing, widening like fissures in a dam. A chance meeting with one of his banking clients. The offshore account numbers she provided for the construction payments. They don't match any known banking protocols. A whispered warning from his private investigator. "The photos of your wife, the ones that started all this, there are inconsistencies in the metadata, signs of manipulation." An urgent call from his accountant. "Mr. Black, there are irregularities in your recent transactions. Significant sums being transferred to untraceable accounts." Each time, Lara had an explanation. Each time, her stories became more elaborate, more convincing. But each time, the doubt grew stronger. One rainy evening, he found himself in his home office, staring at the safe where he kept their most important documents. Something had been nagging at him, a detail that didn't quite fit. Opening it, he began to review the papers inside, property deeds, investment certificates, his grandmother's jewelry. The first missing item he noticed was small, a pair of diamond cufflinks he'd inherited from his father. Then larger things began to stand out, documents showing transfers he didn't remember authorizing, contracts with signatures that looked almost, but not quite, like his own. "Looking for something?" Lara's voice from the doorway made him jump. She stood there in a black silk robe, emerald eyes unreadable in the dim light. Just organizing, he said, forcing a smile. Something seemed to be missing. Really? She moved into the room like liquid shadow. Like what? My father's cufflinks, for one. Some paperwork. Oh, those old things. Her laugh was light, practiced. I had them reappraised and stored in a safety deposit box. More secure that way. I meant to tell you. But something had changed in her voice, a hardness creeping in beneath the honey-sweet tone. As she moved closer, Balfour caught a glimpse of her phone screen, illuminated by an incoming message. The name at the top sent a chill down his spine. Marcus Chen. Why are you in contact with Nia's colleague? The question came out sharper than he'd intended. Lara's expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by confusion. Who? Oh, the doctor. I'm not. Must be a different Marcus Chen. But he'd seen the message preview. Transfer complete. No trace. Don't lie to me, he said quietly, years of suspicion crystallizing into sudden clarity. What's going on, Lara? What have you done? For a moment, just a moment, her mask slipped. The calculating predator beneath the seductive surface showed itself in the curl of her lip, the cold assessment in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by wounded innocence. Darling, you're tired, stressed. Let me run you a bath and we can— No. He stood, moving away from her reaching hands. No more deflections, no more explanations. I want the truth. The truth? She laughed, but it wasn't her usual musical sound. This laugh was sharp, brittle. The truth is that you're pathetically eager to believe the worst about those closest to you. You threw away a faithful wife and unborn child because a virtual stranger showed you some staged photos. The truth, Balfour, is that you've been played like the fool you are. The words hit him like physical blows. The photos, they were fake. Of course they were fake. She was dropping the act now, her true nature emerging like a snake shedding its skin. Everything was fake. The foundation, the beach house project, the chance meetings, all of it carefully orchestrated to get exactly what I wanted. Which was what? But even as he asked, he knew. The missing documents, the unauthorized transfers, the drained accounts. Money, darling. It's always about money. She moved to the safe, spinning the dial with familiar ease. Did you really think someone like me would want someone like you, a boring architect playing at being a family man? The safe door swung open, revealing empty spaces where his most valuable papers had been. By now, most of your liquid assets have been transferred through a complex web of offshore accounts. The property deed to this house has been remortgaged 3 times, with the proceeds safely tucked away where you'll never find them. Even your firm's client accounts have been, shall we say, restructured. Horror dawned as the magnitude of her deception became clear. Every moment of their relationship had been calculated, every intimacy a performance designed to blind him to her true purpose. Why? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Why go to such lengths? The fake photos of Nia, the elaborate scheme. Because men like you don't leave happy marriages for obvious cons, she said, her voice clinically detached now. You needed to believe you were the wronged party, the noble victim seeking solace in the arms of someone who understood you, and you played your part perfectly. She moved to the door, pausing to look back at him with something almost like pity. The irony is, she really did love you, your wife. I watched you together before I made my move. The way she looked at you, that kind of love is rare. And you threw it away because you were too proud, too insecure, too easily manipulated to trust it. I'll expose you, he threatened, reaching for his phone. Call the police. With what evidence? She smiled, and it was like watching frost form on a window. Every transaction was authorized with your signature, or a reasonable facsimile thereof. Every transfer approved through proper channels. And by tomorrow morning, Lara Jackson will cease to exist, just like Lauren Jenkins did in Palm Beach and Lisa James did in Chicago. The grandfather clock in the hall began to strike midnight as Lara, or whatever her real name was, walked out of his office and out of his life, taking with her not just his fortune, but the last shreds of his self-respect. In the deafening silence that followed, Balfour Blue Black sat in his stripped-bare office, surrounded by the evidence of his own staggering gullibility. Somewhere in the city, Nia was carrying their child, lost to him because he had trusted a beautiful lie over a lifetime of love and truth. The first cracks had appeared too late, and now everything, his marriage, his fortune, his future, lay in ruins at his feet. And in the darkness of his empty home, the weight of his mistakes finally brought him to his knees, broken by the realization that he had destroyed his perfect life for a ghost who had never really existed at all. Chapter 7. The vanishing dawn found Balfour still in his office, surrounded by the wreckage of his life. The safe stood open like a wound in the wall, its emptiness a testament to his folly. His phone had been ringing non-stop since 6 a.m., his accountant, his lawyers, his bank's fraud department. Each call brought new revelations of the devastation Lara had wrought. Mr. Black, his primary accountant's voice trembled with barely contained panic. She didn't just take liquid assets, she somehow gained access to your firm's escrow accounts. Client deposits, project funds, all gone, transferred through a series of offshore shells we can't trace. The morning sun painted his office in shades of gold, just as it had that day months ago when Nia had told him about the baby. The memory hit him like a physical blow, her joy, her trust, their shared dreams of the future, all sacrificed on the altar of Lara's deception. His security team had swept the house, finding evidence of her methodical planning. Hidden cameras in his office, key loggers on his computers, even a sophisticated device that had recorded his safe's combination. She had been gathering information from the very beginning, each intimate moment just another opportunity to steal more of his secrets. "It gets worse," his head of security reported, standing in the doorway with a thick folder. "We've been running background checks on everything she ever told you. The foundation never existed. The beach house property, still owned by the original family, they've never heard of her. Even her Harvard MBA, no record of anyone matching her description ever attending." The folder contained profiles of her previous cons: Lauren Jenkins in Palm Beach, Lisa James in Chicago, Lyra Johnson in Seattle. Different names, different faces, but the same methodical destruction of wealthy men who had trusted her. Some had lost millions, others their companies, all of them their dignity. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your personal email. L." With trembling fingers, he opened his inbox to find a single message. The subject line read simply, "The truth you deserved." Inside was a video file and a brief message. "Consider this my parting gift. You should know exactly what you threw away." The video began playing, showing security footage from the Peninsula Hotel. The timestamp matched one of the photos she had used to prove Nia's infidelity. But this angle showed the whole scene: Nia embracing Marcus after receiving the pregnancy confirmation, then immediately calling Balfour's office, calls he had ignored that day because he was with Lara. More footage followed, Nia at the Brooklyn clinic, treating underprivileged children. The cafe meetings with Marcus, clearly showing medical files and surgical plans spread across the table. Each moment Lara had twisted into evidence of betrayal, now revealed as innocent professional interactions. "You were so eager to believe the worst," Lara's voice purred in a final audio message. "So desperate to find betrayal that you couldn't see the loyalty right in front of you. I almost felt bad about it, almost." The sun had fully risen now, illuminating the destruction of his life in harsh detail. His phone kept buzzing, his firm's partners calling emergency meetings, banks freezing accounts, clients demanding explanations. But all he could focus on was a small ultrasound photo he found hidden in his desk drawer, the last trace of Nia and their child. He tried calling her sister again, desperate now to explain, to apologize, to beg forgiveness. The number had been disconnected. Every trace of Naya had vanished as completely as Lara had, leaving him alone with his regret. His private investigator arrived around noon, looking grim. "She's good," he admitted, spreading photos across the desk. "Changes identities like most people change clothes. We've found records of at least 7 different names, but they're probably just the tip of the iceberg." The photos showed Lara in various guises: blonde in Chicago, redhead in Seattle, brunette in Palm Beach. Different looks, different stories, but always the same predatory gleam in those emerald eyes. Eyes he had trusted, eyes that had led him to destroy his real happiness for an elaborate illusion. "What about her connection to Marcus Chen?" Balfour asked, remembering the text he'd glimpsed. Was he involved? The investigator shook his head. Dr. Chen was another victim. She blackmailed him into silence, threatened to destroy his medical career if he tried to warn you. The text you saw, that was about a transfer of medical records. She's been selling confidential patient information on the dark web. Each new revelation was another knife in his gut. Not only had he wrongly accused Nia, but he had failed to protect her privacy, her patient's privacy. The damage Lara had done spread out like ripples in a pond, touching lives he hadn't even considered. By evening, the full scope of her deception had become clear. His firm was on the brink of collapse, his reputation in tatters. The brownstone, his and Nia's dream home, would have to be sold to cover just a fraction of the losses. Even his grandmother's jewelry, pieces meant to be passed down to their child, had vanished into whatever black market Lara used to fence her stolen goods. There might be a way to trace some of the money, his forensic accountant suggested during their 4th emergency meeting of the day. If we can prove fraud, the banks might— "It doesn't matter," Balfour interrupted, staring at the ultrasound photo. "None of it matters anymore, because the truth had finally crystallized in his mind. The money, the house, his firm, they were all just things. What he had really lost, what he had thrown away with both hands, was worth more than all of it combined. Somewhere in the world, Nia was carrying their child, believing he had betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. As night fell over Manhattan, Balfour sat in the nursery they had planned together, now stripped bare of all the joy and hope it had once contained. On his phone, he played the video from the peninsula again and again, torturing himself with evidence of Nia's innocence, of his own blind stupidity. The moon rose over the city, casting long shadows through the empty house. In his office, phones kept ringing with more bad news, more revelations of disaster. But Balfour remained in the nursery, surrounded by ghosts of what might have been, haunted by the knowledge that he had destroyed something precious and irreplaceable for a woman who had never really existed at all. His only company was a single envelope Lara had left on his pillow, containing one final twist of the knife, the original, unaltered photographs that had started it all, along with a note in her elegant hand. "The best cons are the ones where the mark does all the work himself. You wanted so badly to believe she could betray you that you never stopped to wonder why. Your pride made you the perfect target. By the time you read this, I'll be gone, taking everything you valued, except what you threw away yourself. That guilt is yours to keep. Forever yours, Lara, or whatever name you knew me by." Outside, a spring storm broke over Manhattan, rain lashing against windows that no longer felt like they belonged to him. Thunder rolled across the sky like mocking laughter as Balfour Blue-Black sat alone in an empty nursery, surrounded by the ruins of 2 lives, the one Lara had stolen and the one he had destroyed, all by himself. Chapter 8. The search summer blazed across Manhattan like a fever, but Balfour barely noticed the heat. His world had narrowed to a single obsession: finding Nia. The brownstone had been sold, his firm transferred to his partner's control, his life reduced to a Spartan apartment filled with maps, files, and the growing evidence of his futile search. "She's good at disappearing," Devon Marshall, his third private investigator, admitted as they reviewed the latest dead ends. "Changed hospitals, no forwarding address. Her medical license is still active, but it's registered through a proxy service. Even her sisters moved, left no trace." The investigation board that dominated his living room wall told the story of 6 months of failure. Red strings connected photos, documents, and possible sightings, each one leading nowhere. Nia had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed, taking their unborn child, who would be nearly due now, with her. "What about Marcus Chen?" Balfour asked, staring at a photo of the doctor who had tried to warn him. "Any contact?" Devon shook his head. "Transferred to Johns Hopkins 3 months ago. Says he hasn't heard from her since she left, but—" He hesitated, pulling out his tablet. "We did find something interesting in the hospital records. A week before she disappeared, she requested her entire patient history be transferred to a facility in Seattle." Hope flared in Balfour's chest, only to be extinguished by Devon's next words. "We checked. The facility doesn't exist. It was a dummy address. Classic misdirection." Balfour moved to the window, watching the city shimmer in the summer heat. His reflection showed a man he barely recognized, unshaven, haunted, the polish and precision of his former life replaced by desperate determination. His phone buzzed, another call from his lawyers about Lara's devastation of his finances, but he ignored it. Money meant nothing now. Finding Nia was all that mattered. He remembered their last conversation in this room, her words echoing in his memory. "Don't wait too long. Some things, once broken, can never be repaired." Had she known, even then, that she would vanish? Had she given him one last chance to choose truth over lies? "There's something else," Devon said quietly, pulling out a thick folder. "We've been tracking unusual activity in pediatric surgical departments across the country. 3 months ago, a new surgeon joined a children's hospital in Portland. The credentials are different, the name is different, but the surgical techniques described in the hospital's documentation." Balfour snatched the folder, heart pounding. The surgeon, listed as Dr. Sarah Williams, had performed a series of innovative procedures Nia had pioneered. The photo in the hospital's staff directory showed a woman with short cropped hair instead of Nia's distinctive dreadlocks. But the eyes— "Book me on the next flight to Portland," he ordered, already reaching for his phone. But Devon's hand on his arm stopped him. "It's not her," the investigator said gently. "We already checked. Dr. Williams is 62 years old, been practicing for 30 years. She studied under Nia at a conference years ago, learned her techniques." Another dead end. The folder slipped from Balfour's fingers, papers scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Each one represented another false hope, another path leading nowhere. He slumped into his chair, the weight of 6 months of failure pressing down on him. "Tell me something," he said, staring at the investigation board. "In all your years doing this work, have you ever seen someone disappear this completely?" Devon was quiet for a long moment. "Once," he finally admitted, "a witness in a federal case, had the full resources of the U.S. Marshals behind her disappearance, which makes this unusual." "What do you mean?" "Nia didn't just disappear. She vanished with surgical precision, if you'll pardon the pun. Every trace removed, every connection severed, every possible trail obscured. This isn't just someone running away. This is someone with help. Professional help. The implication hung in the air between them. Someone had helped Nia disappear. Someone with resources, with expertise in making people vanish. But who? And more importantly, why? The answer came 3 days later in the form of a hand-delivered letter from Marcus Chen. Inside was a single sheet of hospital letterhead, dated the day after their confrontation in the kitchen. Dear Doctor, Adama, given the circumstances and the potential risks to your safety, I've contacted the individuals we discussed. They're prepared to help, no questions asked. The foundation will cover all expenses. Consider it repayment for the lives you've saved. Whatever you decide, know that you have my full support. Marcus. The foundation. Not Lara's fake charity, but a real organization that helped victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud disappear. Balfour had heard whispers of its existence during his investigation of Lara's other victims. They had resources, connections, and a perfect record of helping people vanish without a trace. She thought she was protecting herself, Balfour whispered, the truth finally dawning. From Lara, from me, from everything I let into our lives. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. For a moment, hope flared again, but it was just another lawyer, another demand for statements about Lara's fraud. He let it go to voicemail, his attention caught by something in the scattered papers on the floor. It was a printout of Nia's last known hospital schedule, the one from the week before she disappeared. Most of it was routine surgeries and consultations, but one entry stood out, a meeting with a social worker from a domestic violence shelter. She was planning it, he realized, the pieces finally falling into place. Even before I signed the divorce papers, she knew Lara would destroy everything, and she was making sure she'd be safe when it happened. Devon gathered his things, preparing to leave. Want me to keep looking? Balfour stared at the investigation board, at the maze of red strings leading nowhere, at the ultrasound photo that was his last connection to his child. For the first time in 6 months, he saw his search for what it really was. Not just futile, but selfish. No, he said quietly, no more searching. Because he finally understood. Nia deserved to be free. Free from the man who had doubted her, free from the chaos Lara had brought into their lives, free to raise their child in peace and safety. His desire to find her was just another form of the selfishness that had destroyed their marriage. That night, as summer lightning flickered over Manhattan, Balfour took down the investigation board. Each photo, each document, each dead end was carefully filed away. Only the ultrasound remained, tucked into his wallet like a talisman. His phone buzzed one last time, a text from Marcus Chen. She's safe. The baby's safe. Let that be enough. And in the darkness of his empty apartment, Balfour Blue Black finally accepted that some searches weren't meant to succeed. Sometimes love meant letting go. Sometimes redemption meant accepting that the person you've wronged deserves a life free from your presence. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to his pain. Somewhere in that vast world, Nia was building a new life, preparing for the birth of their child. And though it broke what remained of his heart, Balfour knew that letting her stay vanished was the first truly unselfish thing he'd done since Lara walked into his office that autumn day. Chapter 9. The Letter. 5 years passed like a sentence served, each day marked by regret and remembrance. Balfour had rebuilt some semblance of a life from the ashes Lara left behind, though his architectural firm never recovered its former glory. He now worked primarily on community projects, hospitals, schools, women's shelters, a form of penance that felt hollow but necessary. The envelope arrived on a crisp October morning, just as the leaves in Central Park were turning the same golden color as Nia's eyes. No return address, no identifying marks, just his name written in unfamiliar handwriting. He found it tucked among his regular mail, innocent-looking, yet somehow charged with possibility. His hands trembled as he opened it, not daring to hope, not daring to believe. Inside was a single photograph, its edges slightly worn, as if it had been handled many times before being sent. The image struck him like a physical blow. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, leaning over a birthday cake decorated with ballet slippers. Her skin was a perfect blend of his and Nia's, her eyes unmistakably his, but her smile, that radiant, joy-filled smile, was all Nia. The cake had 5 candles, 5 years, one for each year he'd missed, one for each year of birthdays, first words, first steps he would never witness. He turned the photo over with shaking fingers, finding a single line written in what he now recognized as Marcus Chen's handwriting. Her name is Hope. Hope. The name they had discussed late one night, curled together in their bed, dreaming of their future. Nia had loved it for its simplicity, its meaning. He had agreed, never knowing how prophetic that name would become. Hope was all he had left now. He called in sick to work, something he hadn't done in years, and spent the day studying every detail of the photograph. Hope wore a purple tutu, her hair in 2 puffs secured with ribbons. Behind her, he could make out fragments of a room, wooden floors, pale blue walls, a window with sunshine streaming through, no clues to location, nothing that could identify where they lived, but evidence that they were happy, that they were thriving. The party decorations were elaborate. Someone had gone to great effort to create a perfect ballet-themed celebration. That was Nia all over, he thought with a pang. She had always believed in making moments special, in celebrating the small joys as well as the large ones. Other details emerged as he studied the photo. A small scar on Hope's elbow. Had she fallen? Who had comforted her? A missing front tooth, her first, had the tooth fairy visited. A butterfly necklace that looked handmade. A gift from Nia. A school project. Each detail was a reminder of all he had missed, all he had thrown away. His phone buzzed. Marcus Chen's number, long dormant but never deleted. His heart raced as he answered. "She doesn't know I sent it," Marcus said without preamble. "And she can't know, but I thought you deserved to see what you helped create, even if you can't be part of her life." "She's beautiful," Balfour whispered, touching the photo gently. "Is she... are they..." "They're happy," Marcus assured him. "Nia's doing groundbreaking work. Hope is thriving. They have a good life." "Does she..." Balfour's voice caught. "Does Hope know about me?" The silence on the other end was heavy with meaning. "She knows she has a father who isn't part of their lives. That's all she needs to know right now. And Nia, has she..." He couldn't finish the question. Has she found someone else? Has she given Hope a new father? "That's not something you get to know," Marcus said gently but firmly. "You lost that right 5 years ago. I'm only calling because I remember how much you wanted this child, how much you loved her before Lara poisoned everything. I thought maybe knowing she exists, that she's happy and healthy, maybe that would help." Balfour stared at the photograph, at his daughter's radiant smile. "Thank you," he managed, "for sending this, for watching over them, for ... "Don't thank me," Marcus interrupted. "I'm not doing it for you. And Balfour, don't try to find them. This isn't an invitation to restart your search. It's just a moment of grace. Accept it for what it is." The line went dead, leaving Balfour alone with the photo and his thoughts. He spent hours that day writing letters he knew he'd never send, to Nia, apologizing for every moment of doubt, every harsh word, every betrayal large and small. To Hope, trying to explain how a man could love his unborn child so deeply and still destroy any chance of being her father. Evening found him in his study, the photo propped against his computer screen as he worked. He began researching trust funds, ways to provide for Hope's future without interfering in her life. It wasn't much, but it was something he could do, some small way to be a father, even if she never knew. His lawyer arrived close to midnight, summoned by an urgent call. Together, they drafted the documents. A trust that would activate on Hope's 18th birthday, managed by a neutral third party. He poured everything he had into it, his savings, his investments, the proceeds from selling his remaining properties. The lawyer advised against such a complete divestment, but Balfour was adamant. "I wasn't there to give her birthday presents," he explained, signing the papers with a steady hand. "Couldn't help with scraped knees or missing teeth or first days of school, but I can give her a future. It's the least I owe her." The lawyer left with the documents, promising to set everything in motion. Balfour remained in his study, the photo his only companion as the city lights twinkled beyond his window. He thought about Hope's name, about the hope she represented, not for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for the simple knowledge that something beautiful had emerged from the wreckage of his mistakes. He touched the photo one last time before carefully placing it in his wallet, next to the old ultrasound image he'd carried for 5 years. 2 pictures of his daughter. Before and after, promise and fulfillment, what might have been and what was. Somewhere in the world, Hope was sleeping in her pale blue room, perhaps dreaming of ballet and birthday cake, blissfully unaware of the father whose heart had just been simultaneously healed and broken by proof of her existence. And in his quiet study, Balfour Blue-Black finally understood that sometimes love meant accepting that you could cherish someone deeply while knowing you would never be part of their life. The city hummed outside his window, its rhythm unchanged by his personal earthquake. But inside everything was different. He had a daughter named Hope, and she was happy, healthy, and loved. For now, for always, that would have to be enough. His phone lit up with a text from Marcus. "Delete my number. Don't try to contact them. Let her grow up in peace." Balfour did as instructed, erasing this last tenuous connection to his former life. But he kept the photo close, a reminder that even in the depths of his greatest mistake, something miraculous had been created. Hope lived up to her name, carrying within her all the promise and possibility he had once thrown away, and all the grace he would spend the rest of his life trying to deserve. Chapter 10. The Redemption. The Children's Hope Foundation took shape in the winter of Balfour's 6th year without Nia and Hope, rising from the ashes of his former life like a phoenix born of regret and redemption. The organization's mission was simple yet profound, to help victims of fraud and manipulation rebuild their lives, with a special focus on supporting single parents and their children. The irony wasn't lost on him that he had become what Lara had pretended to be, the founder of a legitimate foundation doing real work in the world. But unlike her elaborate fiction, the Children's Hope Foundation was built on solid ground, funded by what remained of his personal fortune and supported by others who had been victims of similar schemes. "You're sure about this?" his financial advisor asked as Balfour signed over the last of his investment portfolio. "The trust fund for Hope is one thing, but this is everything else you have." Balfour looked around his new office, smaller and simpler than his architect's suite had been, but somehow more meaningful. The walls were covered with thank you letters and children's drawings, evidence of lives already touched by the foundation's work. "I'm sure," he said quietly. Money was what let Lara destroy my life. Maybe using what's left to help others rebuild theirs is the closest thing to justice I'll ever get. The Foundation's first major project was a partnership with New York Presbyterian Hospital, Nia's former workplace. Together, they established a program providing free medical care to children whose families had been devastated by financial fraud. Each time he visited the pediatric ward, Balfour felt Nia's absence like a physical ache, but he pushed through it, determined to honor her work, even if he couldn't be part of her life. Dr. Marcus Chen, though initially skeptical, became an unexpected ally in this endeavor. While he never revealed anything about Naya and Hope's whereabouts, he helped shape the medical program, ensuring it reached those most in need. "She'd be proud of this," Marcus said one evening, reviewing the latest program statistics. "Not of you," he added quickly, seeing hope flare in Balfour's eyes. "But of what you're building here. It's what she always wanted to do." The foundation grew, expanding beyond New York to other cities. Each new location was chosen with careful consideration, deliberately avoiding any area where Balfour's private investigators suggested Nia might have settled. He was keeping his promise not to search for them, even as his work followed in her footsteps. One rainy Tuesday, a young mother came into his office clutching paperwork and looking lost. Her story was painfully familiar. A con man had swept into her life, gained her trust, and systematically destroyed everything she had built. But unlike Balfour's story, her children were living this nightmare with her. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "We have nowhere to go. No one to turn to." Balfour thought of Hope, of the photograph he still carried in his wallet, of the life he had forced Nia to build alone. "Yes, you do," he said firmly. "You have us now." The foundation sprang into action. Within hours, the family was settled in safe housing. By the end of the week, the children were enrolled in new schools, their mother in job training. A month later, she had a stable position and a real chance at a fresh start. It became a pattern. Each family they helped was another small step toward redemption, another chance to prevent someone else from suffering as he had made Naya suffer. The foundation developed a comprehensive support system: legal aid, counseling, job placement, housing assistance. Everything Balfour wished he could have provided for Nia and Hope, he now provided for others. The years rolled by, marked by small victories and quiet achievements. The foundation helped draft legislation protecting fraud victims, established support groups, created educational programs, teaching financial literacy and healthy relationship skills. Each initiative was named after Hope: the Hope Legal Fund, Hope's Haven Housing Program, Project Hope Mentoring, though only Balfour knew the true significance of the name. On Hope's 7th birthday, he always knew the date, though he could never celebrate it. Balfour sat in his office late into the night, looking at her photograph. She would be in 2nd grade now, probably bringing cupcakes to class, maybe still taking ballet lessons. The ache of missing these moments had never diminished, but it had evolved into something almost sacred, a private ceremony of remembrance and regret. His computer chimed with an email notification. Another success story. A mother and daughter, recently helped by the foundation, had just moved into their own apartment. The attached photo showed them standing proudly in their new home, surrounded by donated furniture and smiling like they'd won the lottery. The daughter was about Hope's age, with the same radiant smile. For a moment, the resemblance was so strong it took his breath away. But this wasn't his child to claim, just as the good work he was doing wasn't his path to forgiveness. Some debts could never be repaid. A knock at his door revealed Marcus, making one of his rare visits. "Thought I'd find you here today," he said, setting down a cup of coffee. 7 years. 7 years, Balfour echoed, touching the photograph in his wallet. "Is she—" "She's fine," Marcus cut him off gently. "They both are, but that's not why I'm here." He pulled out a newspaper, pointing to an article about the Foundation's latest initiative. "This program you're launching for children of fraud victims, it's good work, really good work." "It's not enough," Balfour said quietly. "It will never be enough." "No," Marcus agreed. "It won't. But it's something, and sometimes something is all we can offer." He paused, then added, "Naya's Research Foundation made a donation this morning. Anonymous, of course, but she knows what you're doing here. She sees it. The revelation hit Balfour like a thunderbolt. Somewhere out there, Nia was aware of his efforts, was even supporting them in her own way. It wasn't forgiveness, he knew better than to hope for that, but it was something. After Marcus left, Balfour worked late into the night, refining plans for the Foundation's next project. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a life touched by their work, a family helped, a child given hope. In his wallet, Hope's photograph seemed to glow with its own light, a beacon guiding him forward. He couldn't be her father, couldn't watch her grow up or help shape her future directly. But through the foundation that bore her name, he could help create a world a little more worthy of her, a little more protected from the kind of destruction he had once enabled. It wasn't redemption. Nothing could redeem the choices that had led him here. But it was purpose, meaning, a way to transform regret into action and guilt into positive change. And on nights like this, when the weight of his mistakes threatened to crush him, that purpose was enough to keep him moving forward, one helped family at a time. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Marcus had a new phone. The donation, she said, to make sure it helps other children find their own hope. Balfour read the message through tears, understanding the double meaning. Somewhere out there, his daughter was living up to her name, inspiring hope not just in him, but in countless others who would never know her story. And though he could never be part of her life, he could spend the rest of his own making sure her namesake foundation brought that same hope to others. It wasn't the redemption he had dreamed of, but it was the redemption he had earned. And as he turned back to his work, Balfour Blue Black finally understood that sometimes the best way to honor lost love was to transform its lesson into something larger than yourself. Chapter 11. The Reunion. The Chicago Medical Conference Center buzzed with activity, thousands of healthcare professionals gathering for the annual Pediatric Innovation Summit. Balfour hadn't planned to attend. His foundation's involvement in medical care was usually handled by the board. But a last-minute cancellation had forced his presence. Now, standing in the crowded auditorium, he felt fate's hand in his reluctant journey here. The keynote speaker was listed simply as Dr. N. Williams, pioneering pediatric surgeon. No photo in the program, no detailed biography, just a brief outline of groundbreaking surgical techniques that had revolutionized infant heart surgery. But something about the writing style, the passionate focus on accessibility for underprivileged patients, had struck a chord in his memory. He sat in the back row, half hidden behind a column, as the lights dimmed for the presentation. The crowd fell silent as the speaker approached the podium, and Balfour's world stopped turning. 10 years had left their mark on Nia, but only in the most striking ways. Her dreadlocks were gone, replaced by a crown of silver-streaked natural curls that framed her face like a halo. Designer suits had given way to elegant simplicity, a cream blouse, charcoal slacks, low heels. But it was her presence that commanded the room, a quiet authority that needed no artificial enhancement. "Good morning," she began, her voice exactly as he remembered it. "We're here today to discuss not just surgical innovation, but access to care, because what good is advancement if it only serves the privileged few?" Balfour sat transfixed as she presented, watching her command the room with the same passion that had first drawn him to her 15 years ago. Her surgical techniques were revolutionary, but it was her vision for implementing them in underserved communities that drew the loudest applause. She spoke about hope, the word piercing his heart each time she said it, and about second chances, about how every child deserved not just survival, but the opportunity to thrive. About a network of clinics she'd established, bringing cutting-edge care to families who would otherwise fall through the cracks. It wasn't until the Q&A session that their eyes met across the crowded room. He saw the moment she recognized him, saw the slight falter in her professional demeanor before she recovered, smoothly answering another question about surgical protocols. But her eyes kept finding him in the crowd, like a compass needle seeking north. The session ended to thunderous applause. Colleagues swarmed the stage, eager to speak with her, but she managed them with practiced grace, slowly working her way toward the back of the auditorium, toward him. "Hello, Balfour," she said quietly, stopping 3 feet away, close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes, far enough to maintain safe distance. "Hello, Nia," he replied, her real name feeling like a prayer on his lips. "Or should I say Dr. Williams?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You always were good at figuring things out." Eventually, the words carried no bitterness, just a statement of fact. "Your work." He gestured to the presentation screen, still showing her final slide. "It's remarkable. You're changing lives." "So are you," she said, surprising him. "The Children's Hope Foundation. Very subtle naming choice, by the way." He flushed, but before he could respond, they were interrupted by an eager resident with questions about the presentation. Nia handled it smoothly, but Balfour caught her glancing at her watch. "You have somewhere to be," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." She hesitated, then added, "Hope has a ballet recital this afternoon. I never miss them." The casual mention of their daughter's name hit him like a physical blow. "She's still dancing?" Nia's expression softened slightly. "Every chance she gets. She's quite talented." Another pause, another check of her watch. Then, surprising them both, "Would you like to get coffee? I have an hour before I need to leave for the recital." The hotel cafe was quiet. Most conference attendees still in sessions. They sat at a corner table, 2 steaming cups between them, like a neutral zone in contested territory. "You look well," he offered, studying the subtle changes time had wrought. "The silver suits you." "Earned every strand," she replied, stirring her coffee absently. "Single motherhood while building a medical practice, it ages you quickly." The guilt must have shown on his face, because she shook her head. "That wasn't meant as an accusation, Balfour. Just a fact. We all made our choices." "I made the wrong ones," he said quietly. "Every possible wrong one." "Yes," she agreed simply. "You did. But—" She gestured to the conference program, open to a page about the Foundation's medical assistance program. "You've tried to make something good from it. That counts for something." They sat in silence for a moment, years of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Balfour gathered his courage. "How is she?" "Really?" Nia's face transformed as she spoke about their daughter. "She's brilliant, stubborn, has your eye for design and my inability to sit still. She's taking advanced classes, wants to be either a doctor or a professional ballerina. This week at least." She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then turned it to show him a recent photo. Hope at 10, tall for her age, beaming in a ballet costume. His heart clenched at how much she'd grown since the birthday photo he carried. "She asks about you sometimes," Nia admitted, putting the phone away. "I've never lied to her. I tell her that you're her father, that you're not part of our lives, and that it's complicated. When she's older, if she wants to know more—" "You'll tell her everything?" The thought terrified him. "I'll tell her the truth, that you made a terrible mistake, that you've tried to make amends in your own way, and that the choice to know you will be hers to make." The fairness of this response, so characteristic of Nia's inherent grace, brought tears to his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for raising her so well. For everything." She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee. "The Foundation's work. It's helped a lot of people, saved a lot of families from what happened to us." "It's not enough," he said, echoing his words to Marcus years ago. "It will never be enough." "No," she agreed, "but it's something, and something is better than nothing." She checked her watch again. "I need to go. Hope's waiting." They stood, the moment drawing to its inevitable close. "Nia," he said as she gathered her things, "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. More sorry than I have words to express." She looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, seeing perhaps how time and regret had changed him. "I know," she said finally. "I've known for years. It's why I let Marcus send you the birthday photo. It's why I donate to the foundation. It's why—" She took a deep breath. "It's why I'm going to give you this." She pulled out a business card, blank, except for an email address. "Not for regular contact," she cautioned, "but maybe once a year, around her birthday. A photo, an update, something." Balfour took the card with trembling fingers, recognizing the magnitude of this gesture. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't make me regret this," she said quietly. Then, gathering her professional demeanor around her like armor, "Goodbye, Balfour. Take care of yourself." He watched her walk away, elegant and assured, until she disappeared into the crowd of conference attendees. Only then did he look down at his cold coffee and let the tears fall. His phone buzzed. Marcus, of course. "Heard you two met. You okay?" "No," he texted back honestly, "but maybe, someday, I will be." Outside the hotel, Chicago's spring sunshine painted the world in shades of possibility. Somewhere in the city, his daughter was preparing to dance, his ex-wife was hurrying to watch her, and a door he had thought forever closed had opened just a crack. It wasn't forgiveness, nothing so complete or simple, but it was something. And as Balfour Black clutched the business card that represented a tiny bridge to his daughter's future, he understood that sometimes something was more than enough. Chapter 12. The New Beginning. They didn't fall back in love. Life isn't a fairy tale, and some breaks are too clean to mend. But over the next 5 years, something new grew in the space between them, something neither had expected. A careful friendship built on shared concern for their daughter and mutual respect for the people they had become. The annual emails became quarterly, then monthly. Each message from Nia brought new glimpses of Hope's life. Honor roll certificates, ballet recital programs, science fair victories. Balfour saved every photo, every update, building a paper chronicle of the daughter he watched grow from afar. Hope turned 15 on a golden autumn day, the same age Balfour had been when he first dreamed of becoming an architect. The email from Nia that day was different from the others. She asked about you again, not just the usual questions, but real ones, about who you are, what you do. I told her about the foundation, about the families you've helped. She wants to know more. Are you ready for that? The question haunted him for days. Was he ready? Could anyone be ready to explain to their child why they had chosen doubt over trust, lies over truth? But Hope deserved answers, even if they were painful ones. His response was simple. Whatever she wants to know, I'll tell her the whole truth, no matter how much it hurts. The meeting was arranged for neutral ground, a quiet cafe in Boston where Hope was attending a summer dance program. Balfour arrived an hour early, his heart thundering in his chest as he waited. When the door chimed, he looked up to see Nia entering first, followed by a tall teenager who made his breath catch. Hope had his height, his eyes, but everything else, her grace, her presence, the thoughtful way she studied him, was pure Nia. She wore her hair in intricate braids, a dancer's posture evident in every movement as she approached his table. "Hello," she said simply, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm Hope." "I know," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. I've thought about you every day since before you were born." She nodded, processing this. Mom told me some of it, about the woman who lied to you, who stole everything, about how you believed her instead of Mom. No accusation in her voice, just a statement of facts. But I want to hear your side. I want to understand. For the next 2 hours, as Nia sat quietly at a nearby table pretending to work on her laptop, Balfour told his daughter everything. The whole ugly truth of his mistakes, his regrets, his attempts at redemption. Hope listened with remarkable poise, asking occasional questions that cut to the heart of matters with teenage directness. "Were you ever going to look for me?" she asked at one point. "I wanted to," he admitted, "every day. But your mother deserved better than that. You both did. Sometimes loving someone means respecting their right to be free of you." Hope considered this, stirring her hot chocolate. "The foundation. You named it after me." "Yes, because you gave me hope that something good could come from my worst mistakes. Every child we help, every family we save. It's all because you exist. Mom says you help people who've been hurt like she was, that you try to stop it from happening to others." "I try," he said quietly. "It doesn't make up for what I did, but—" "No!" she interrupted, showing a flash of Nia's directness. "It doesn't. But it matters that you tried, that you're still trying." They talked until the cafe was closing, about everything and nothing. Hope's dreams of becoming a doctor who could dance, her favorite subjects in school, her thoughts on the world. She was brilliant, thoughtful, completely her own person, shaped by Nia's loving guidance, but with an independence that was uniquely hers. As they prepared to leave, Hope hesitated, then pulled something from her bag. "I bring these to all my performances," she said, holding out a pair of worn ballet shoes. "Mom says they were the first ones you bought before everything. They're too small now, but they're still important to me." Balfour stared at the tiny shoes, remembering the day he'd bought them on impulse, dreaming of future dance recitals he would never attend. "You kept them. Mom kept everything you left for me. Said I'd want them someday." Hope squared her shoulders, so like Nia in that moment it hurt. I'd like to invite you to my next recital, if you want to come." The offer hung between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Balfour looked at Nia, who gave a small nod. "I'd be honored," he said softly. "It doesn't fix everything," Hope cautioned, wise beyond her years. "And I'm not ready for regular contact or anything, but maybe we can start somewhere." As they left the cafe, Hope surprised them both by giving him a quick, awkward hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for telling me the truth, for not making excuses." Watching them walk away, Balfour felt something shift in his heart. Not healing, some wounds were too deep for that, but perhaps understanding. Hope had her mother's capacity for grace, tempered by a wisdom that recognized both the possibility of change and the importance of boundaries. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, he received 2 messages. The first from Hope. "The recital is in December. Mom will send details." The second from Nia. "You did good today. She needed to hear it all, and you gave her that. Thank you." Outside his window, Boston's lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a story of loss and redemption, of mistakes and consequences, of new beginnings built from the ashes of what was lost. In his wallet, he still carried the first photo of Hope, now joined by today's memories. They would never be a conventional family. Too much had happened for that. But maybe they could be something else. 3 people bound by love and loss, finding their way toward a future that honored both the pain of the past and the possibility of tomorrow. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Marcus. "Heard about today. Remember what I told you years ago? Sometimes something is enough." And sitting there in the quiet night, Balfour Blue Black finally understood that love wasn't about grand passions or dramatic reconciliations. Sometimes it was about accepting the consequences of your choices while remaining open to the grace of new beginnings. Sometimes it was about learning that redemption doesn't erase the past, but builds something new beside it. Hope had given him her truth, Naya had given him a chance, and together they had given him something he had lost 15 years ago. Not forgiveness, not restoration, but possibility. The possibility that even the worst mistakes could lead to growth, that broken things could become beautiful in new ways, and that sometimes the end of one story was just the beginning of another. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, those belong in stories simpler than this one, but it was real and true, and filled with its own kind of hope. And for now, for always, that would be enough. In the end, Balfour learned that love isn't about grand passions or intoxicating moments. It's about trust, truth, and the quiet strength to admit when you've been catastrophically wrong. Sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't about romantic reconciliation, but about finding peace in the aftermath of destruction and building something new from the ruins of what was lost. My beautiful story reader, I know your time is precious, and I won't take much of it, just 30 seconds. But before you leave, I have a small request. Today marks the beginning of a brand new year, and with it comes hope, dreams, and the chance to grow together. I want to make you a promise. If you subscribe to this channel today, you won't just be joining a community, you'll be joining a family. Our stories, our moments, and our journey are special, and I'd hate for you to miss out. Once you lose us in the vast sea of YouTube, it might be hard to find your way back. So, please, take a leap of faith. Let's walk into this new year together, as a family that shares stories, emotions, and memories. Hit that subscribe button, and let's make this year unforgettable, together. You are the heart of this channel, and I promise you'll never regret being part of it. Love you, and good night.